Hello, everyone. My name is Frank Stockman, and I lead the Brevard County cohort. I am a teacher of 13 years. I'm currently teaching at Bayside High School, where I teach AP United States History and United States History Honors.
Hi, I'm Christine Endicott. I am the cohort leader of the Osceola group. I work at St. Cloud High School. I teach U.S. history and world history.
Well, we want to welcome everyone here today. We're going to go over our civil conversations model that you went over in the first semester. And basically on the agenda, what you see here is we're just going to kind of go through some discussion together. So this is an open forum. We want you all to, chime in through the audio if you want, if that's more convenient, to where you can just kind of talk about the different things that we're going to be discussing. Or if you'd like to kind of type in on the chat box on the right-hand side there, if you're looking at your screen, there should be a little a button on the side that looks like a chat bubble. If you click on that, you'll see a live chat feed over there, and you can type your questions in or your comments. And Christine will kind of be monitoring those as she can help us talk a little bit more about maybe what you're saying in the chat that we may not be able to hear you saying, but we can bring that up and move forward as well. So feel free to chime in whenever you'd like. A big part of what we want to see in this debrief is where you guys can give that feedback. One of the best things we can do to help each other is in this collaboration is to go over things that worked well, didn't work well. Some really good advice comes from some great discussion. So if you'll notice on our agenda, we're going to be talking about the successes first, moving into surprises and challenges, and then maybe some tips for the next time you do a civil conversation debrief. So we'll move on from there. So the first thing we want to talk about is successes, because we want to hear your positive stories and how it helped your students in engaging your classroom. So if you want to kind of use your audio and chime in now, go ahead and if there's anything that you noticed that was a really positive outcome for you or an impact on your students, maybe there was just a really good anecdote that you can kind of share that was really, really nice for your students to see, or maybe a change that you saw in your students in your classroom from now introducing this model and opening up some discussion in your classroom. So please feel free to chime in now. Now I can't see the chat box, so Christine, is there any lively discussion happening you could share with us?
Nope, nothing yet.
Well, I can say maybe add a little bit of my own anecdotes. In going through the civil conversation model, what I've noticed from my students is a lot of times the students that in normal, regular, everyday classroom where you're asking for hands up for answers and questions, maybe not so much that they're going to participate, but in the civil conversation model where you're really giving them specified topics to discuss, not only that, but you give them the resources that they're reading and they're answering from, giving them that support and giving them something to use when they do their discussions, you really see a lot of students that maybe don't normally participate that are going to participate a little bit more now, because maybe they like to argue in the sense that they like to prove a point. Maybe they just like to be, hearing about that specific topic. But I've noticed that those students that maybe not normally talking do sometimes tend to get out of their shell a little bit.
All right, so we have Laura said that a success for me was that lower level students participated. Middle schoolers are very opinionated, long day, and passionate when they choose a side. So the strategy was well received by them. Thanks, Laura.
Excellent, excellent. And I think that's a really good point. With middle schoolers or in high schoolers are usually just basically the same, just a few more years on them. But they are very opinionated. And what's really good about the civil conversation model is that when you structure those controversial topics, it allows them to not only be heard, but allows them to really interact with others that may not share the same idea as them. And that's okay, as long as they do it in a respectful manner and they have that ability to work with one another instead of against one another. And hopefully you all were seeing the same thing, that even though they want to be heard, that they're also hearing others. And that should be, a pivotal point of these civil conversation models is you don't have to agree, but it's nice for you to respect what others are thinking as well.
Bonnie shared that it was 100% success for engagement. I'd have to say for me, that was one of my biggest successes as well.
That's an excellent success that I hear from you guys, that it's working. Hopefully what we're hearing from you guys as well, and it's a lot of teachers have reported this, is that, you know, in their everyday normal classroom time, it's a lot of let me give you information and let's move on to the next thing. And I'm definitely guilty of that in my classroom as well. But the civil conversation model does give you that platform that it really puts the learning on them and allows them to really not only engage in that conversation, but then by the end of the class period, you know, you like that moment where they're like, oh, I guess I really did learn something. And you know, they leave the classroom with a better understanding of the topic that what they would have gotten if you would have just given them the information. So that's really, really good to hear that the students are walking away with a positive walkaway point.
Nicole shared that something I truly appreciated was that the civil conversation model tied into the 3-year close reading initiative that my district has. My school's professional developments also have been geared towards having students engage collaborative discussions, and it just all tied together so well. Wow, that's really awesome.
That sounds really good, and especially when you can go to your administration and tell them how well this program's working for you. And oh, by the way, it hits our district initiatives. That just makes everything more worthwhile. And thank you for sharing that. That was awesome.
And then Jacqueline.
Oh, I'm sorry. Go ahead.
Jacqueline also shared how great the engagement was with her students as well.
Excellent. Now, one of the last questions that we have on here was, do you think that the strategies help you to reach the social studies benchmarks or the LAFs that you're doing in your classroom? What I'd like to hear is if you feel that it was kind of a seamless transition, that you were able to use the model with content that you were already looking to do, or if you found that kind of using a predetermined lesson plan was better for you, even though it may not have fit directly into the content you were doing at the time. If maybe it still worked and it helped you to further your goals in other areas. That would be something that I would really love to hear if anybody has any talking points on that. Too often as a leader, what we hear is that, you know, well, I really don't have time to put this into my lesson plans, or, you know, my curriculum is already set and I really don't have room for that sort of thing. You know, and it always comes back to time. And as much as I appreciate that, and believe me, I think we're all kind of feeling it now in the second semester. At the same time, there's a lot of different instances that you already have something that you've planned for a particular curriculum, but instead of doing that plan for that particular content, you can kind of slide in this other strategy to where it doesn't really take a lot of extra time away from your content, but it allows you just to use a different strategy to use the content in a different way. Hopefully many of you are able to see that and you're able to use it in that manner.
Bonnie shared that the model works well with civics. I know for me in U.S. history, I was definitely able to tie it to my standards, and I was able to use the lessons that they provided. So it worked out great for me.
Excellent, excellent. And I think that the more we can use these engaging strategies, the more likely the students are to have a better understanding of the content, number one. Number two, as the participant noticed earlier, that the district initiatives with closed reading, evidence-based support when they're giving their arguments, all of those things come into all of the things that are tested during our time in this especially busy testing season coming up. And so anything that the social studies classes can do to help the language arts classes with those reading strategies and writing strategies, this is certainly one of the better strategies to work with that. All right, let's move on to a little bit. And the next thing here is the surprises. And I think this is definitely something that I think we all have experienced. Maybe it was a surprise of, oh, that was a really good surprise, and that made a shift in the perspective, and the kids really got it, and it worked really well. Or maybe the not so great surprise of, aha, I'm really going to have to make sure I do something different next time to make sure something like that doesn't happen again. And I think that's a really good part of this project and this process is that we're going to find things that we couldn't prepare for. And as we all know, we're going to run into those every new strategy that we have, and we're going to be able to fix those as we go along. And hopefully you are able to overcome those obstacles. But if you have any kind of interesting aha moments or good or bad, we'd like to hear what you guys were going through so that we can kind of see if we can help remediate any of those. I know one of the teachers that I had spoken with earlier in her classroom when she was doing the civil conversation model, she noticed very quickly that the controversial topic got out of control as they were going through this topic, and they started to interact. It escalated very, very quickly, and so she had to step in a nice, calm fashion to kind of bring them back to the reason why they were having this discussion, and brought back the rules of how we're going to respectfully and politely talk to one another. And so she had to kind of reinforce those ground rules and those parameters. And she said once she kind of reintroduced those, the kids kind of calmed down a little bit, and they were able to proceed and finish that lesson. And one of the things that she said she was going to do the next time they were going to have this to kind of maybe get out in front of it a little bit is she was going to print out all of those rules and have things on a sheet, so that when she handed those out in the beginning of the lesson, that they would have them in front of them as a constant reminder of this is a very different kind of argument. This is not something where we're going to yell or shout, but it's something where we're going to respect. And so she said the second time she did that, it was very helpful, and it definitely helped with those kinds of conversations because the students had that reminder right in front of them.
Bonnie shared that her class discussed DACA, and one of her students got very emotional. Amy also agreed with using current events. Her students love relating current events to our content. Nicole said, in the future, I would make some anchor charts with some discussion stems for the students, especially those who need a bit more encouragement to share and discuss with others.
I think that is a great idea about the anchor stems, because especially if you're dealing with the lower level students or possibly the younger students, it might be hard for them to just simply form that thought for they may know what they're thinking, but it's hard for them to write it down or hard for them to say it out loud. And that's a fantastic idea. Usually if a student has those anchor stems and it's something they can start their thought with, then the rest of it kind of rolls out, and it helps them and gives them that confidence that maybe they're not stepping out so much on that limb, but they've got that support system. And that's a fantastic idea. That's really good. Did anybody have anything to and maybe not to bring out the negative, but something that definitely helped you to plan for the next time, something that you thought maybe went a little awry, but you were able to rail it in, and you have a plan for next time, or maybe you need some help with putting in a plan for next time to make sure that you have something that can work better for this model? Because I think all of us kind of know that when we start a new procedure or a new strategy, a lot of times it's not going to go as well as we thought it was, or maybe we are really hyped up and jazzed about it and the kids are maybe ho-hum. But also I think that as we've noticed over the years that we've been teaching, the more that we pursue that strategy, the more that we work on the strategy and we front load that for ourselves, it gets easier and easier as we go on and we use that strategy, because the students become much more versed in it, they become more comfortable with it, and it becomes much more seamless as we move on. And I think that's another goal of this program, is to stick with it and find out what needs tweaking, what did work, and how can we change something to make it better next time.
Bonnie shared, what I was surprised about was the tolerance that I had to reinforce and the vocabulary that I should have front loaded.
Excellent, excellent. I think that's with any class, any age group, I think you're going to find that vocab is definitely going to be a barrier for some students. And so it may take a little bit more time on our part, but I feel that that's something that I could do a better job of as well, as going through and kind of looking at the reading that they're going to have. What are the vocab that they may not understand, and maybe even putting together something on the board or a sheet for them, or even going through the reading prior to the discussion of what are some words you guys need some more help with. And I think that's a fantastic idea. If you give that or work with them upfront about it, it could help the process itself go a little smoother. And the tolerance part, I think, once again, a lot of the reasons why you're using this civil conversation method, pardon me, is that a lot of kids don't know how to interact with each other. They're very closed-minded, and what I believe is what's best. And so they're very combative when there are differing opinions and differing views. And I think the goal of this program is to find it to where the students can find those differences and not be as combative and be very much responsive and yet polite at the same time. And especially for the younger students, they don't get a lot of that. They don't see a lot of those conversations happening. So it's difficult for them to do that properly because they need a lot of that front loading. So hopefully if you're having those issues in your classroom with the civil conversation model, you've got the hope that it'll be better the next time. And they've already run through it once. Maybe it wasn't as we expected, but moving forward, fixing those small pieces, and like you said, maybe front loading the vocab could help them to have a much more seamless conversation the second time. And I think that's a great idea.
Bonnie also added a timer monitor would have been very helpful.
Absolutely. I don't think that's a bad idea at all, because if things are going well and before you know it, you've got 2 minutes until the bell rings and you're right where you want them. And so it's helpful not only to keep your classroom management in time, but also, sometimes those kids want to capitalize on time and they just keep on talking, which is good in some cases because they're engaged and they're passionate about it. But sometimes if we're not careful, you can have those monopolizers, which they want to just talk and talk and talk. And on one hand, it's good, but on the other hand, there might be 3 or 4 students that really did want to say something, but maybe that person got out the idea first, or, they talk so often that it's maybe a little off-putting for those students that may be a little more shy. So definitely, I think a good idea would be the timekeeper. And really those students that may not talk at all or are super shy, you give them a job like a timekeeper, and they might even not only be a big part of the classroom for that discussion, it might even just give them a little more confidence to help out next time with maybe some more discussion. Excellent feedback. So let's go a little bit into challenges now. So this is where we have the biggest hiccups, where something was really difficult and maybe it kind of is off-putting, or it keeps you from wanting to do that model again. And so is there anything that you'd like to share that maybe the students specifically struggled with? We talked a little bit about tolerance that someone else brought up earlier, but is there something specific that maybe the students had responded to or given you feedback about, this was really difficult for me, or something that was just hard in general? And if anything at all, there's any support that you may need, that if I only had this, or if I knew how to do that specifically, that would have made a better process for you. And if there's anything that you feel that there's modification that's needed that for your students specifically would help them to have a better experience, any of those things that you may have to share out, we'd love to hear that, because again, the goal of the project is to make sure that you're not only comfortable with it, but you want to use it again and again, and definitely beyond this cohort, and next year and the year after that, you want to expand upon it and use it more often in your classroom, as long as you see the benefit of that. And if there's anything right now keeping you from seeing that benefit, what can we do to make sure that you have an even better time next time?
All right, well, there's a couple comments here. Laura said she needed to refocus the students when they got too passionate while discussing their points of view. She kept referring them back to the texts. Keisha shared that maybe a pacing guide to show the time frame for staying on topic, or when to release and move on.
I think those okay. Go ahead.
Well, we have a few more people who agreed with the timer would have been helpful. And then somebody else did agree also that, placing a time limit with them would do that. But a pacing guide sounds like a great idea.
Absolutely. I think that what we're all kind of looking at, and I hear a couple of you saying, is this idea of the time. And time can be good and bad. It can be good in that, it's never bad when you have kids that are just extremely engaged and you have tons of kids talking and they have such a good discussion that you don't want to stop it, and things are progressing and they're learning, and then the bell rings and you're like, because then what we get is what we wanted to take one day, we see, well, we don't want to end the conversation there, so I got to take another day, and that means I got to push something else back. And so I think that this idea of maybe this pacing guide or a pacing chart would be great, because then you can give them the time parameters to say, we're going to get through this whole thing. We're going to have a lot of discussion. We want everybody to be heard, and this is how we're going to do it. And then especially for any kind of student that you have, be it middle school or high school, putting that in front of them in some sort of a handout allows them to kind of keep themselves monitored as well. I love the idea of a time manager, someone, because I know that when I'm in the classroom, I'm terrible at keeping the time. I always have to have a kid tell me, all right, remind me when we have 5 minutes left of class. And so having someone that's dedicated to just kind of giving that time and giving maybe visual cues with 30 seconds left or a 1 minute left card so that everybody can see it, it could not only be a visual cue for the teacher to know how much time to wrap things up and maybe to interject with a quick comment to let them know how much time they have left, or maybe even, again, that self-monitoring of the students. If they've got someone kind of holding up a card, it could help them to know, okay, I got to wrap this up real quick. I've got 30 seconds to make my argument. And I think that's a fantastic idea. Timing seems to be one of the biggest issues to make sure that we can have a very engaging classroom and yet get all of that material out before we have to leave. Was there anything else anybody would like to add about any challenges? It seems like the largest challenge was the timing, and yet several of you have said about the tolerance piece. And I think to kind of fix the tolerance issue is to have more of these models with that front loading. Just give them the rules of engagement, let them know this is how we're going to interact with each other. And the more and more you have these conversations, I think the easier and easier it will be for these students to have that tolerance level and that politeness. And you don't always have to have a full-blown, 48-minute discussion. If you want to do a quick 10-minute or 15-minute, wrap up of an event or a review to let them have their opinions, and maybe that would even kind of curtail some of the talking or the conversations happening during the lesson. If you say, okay, guys, at the end of class today, we're going to take 10 minutes and we're going to talk it out. That might allow you to get through more content in the beginning of the class time, and at the end of the class time, let them, ask their questions and interact with each other in a civil manner, just to reinforce that model of respect and text-based evidence.
Oh, wait, let's see. Laura replied, my ELL students were eager to speak, but were afraid to. So I translated for the rest of the class. And if they had a question, I translated for them to be able to answer it. It was worth it, I think, even though time consuming.
That is fantastic. If you have the ability to do that, that is so empowering for those students, because like you said, they're a little trepidatious because of language barrier. But if they can speak to their classmates through an interpretation like yourself, I think that's extremely empowering. Not only that, but it may even help to build bonds in the classroom, because at times those language barriers prevent students from maybe interacting with them. And so if they can translate through you and then still get their message heard and their voice heard, that's very validating for them, an extremely powerful tool for the classroom. So that is a fantastic success story right there. Absolutely. All right, so let's move on to any kind of changes. So is there anything that you think you may want to add or give a tip, or maybe have a question about something that now that you've tried it once, maybe twice, you've reflected on it, before you were to try it again, is there anything else that you may need, or something of a suggestion you may be looking for, to kind of now that I have more information, now that I've tried it once or twice, this is something I feel could help me make it even better. If there's any questions you have about kind of changes that you may be looking for, or even just looking for suggestion, that would be great. I think we've actually kind of answered this a little bit as we've been going along here. I think many of you have enjoyed the idea of the time management. The translation was fantastic, and if you have the ability to do that, that was great. Also, the tolerance piece is I think some of the tips that we had talked about was maybe keeping the rules in front of the students, or maybe putting it up on your board so they see those as you move along. And most of what I've heard from you guys is the timing and the tolerance piece. And I think if you just kind of tweak a little bit of those, it should be much more successful for you next time, above and beyond the success that you're already reporting, which is fantastic.
All right, I have a couple of comments here. Nicole said, instead of groups of 4 or so, I used a lineup strategy where students lined up across the back of the room according to if they agreed, felt neutral, or disagreed with the topic. I put people into groups based on this. The only major variable was that every class has a different mix or agree, disagree, etc. Okay. And then Bonnie said she would like to watch more examples on video.
I think the lineup idea is a great idea and a way to kind of mix it up for your classroom. And it's a good way that kids not only are engaged, but getting them up and out of their seat and moving helps them to engage as well. And, you know, depending on the makeup of your class, they may be a little silly. And if that's the way that your class works and you can work that out, that's great. But I think, you know, just having them visually represent themselves into the degree of which they agree, I think that's really nice. And then when you can mix up the groups to kind of put differing opinions together on purpose to make them kind of talk it out in smaller groups, I think that's a great idea. But I think you're also correct in where you may have a class where you have very, very strongly on one side of the argument and a little sparse on the other side. Which in some cases, what you'll talk about in your role play and simulations in the second cycle is that forced perspective of, well, you know, now you're going to be on this side and this is what you have to argue. But for the purposes of the civil conversation, you want them to kind of, at least as much as possible, argue for the side they feel the most passionate about. And so I think the lineup idea was a great idea, and hopefully it worked out for you. And if anybody else wants to use that strategy, go ahead and take it. And then the second person was talking about, I've already forgotten it. What was it they said?
Videos.
Video.
More video. Let me go back. It goes kind of quickly and I don't get to see a lot of them without scrolling. I would like to watch more examples on video. That's a great idea.
It is, and I'm not quite sure if the foundation is collecting more and more samples of videos in order to have more examples, but I would venture to say that if you do one of these in your classroom and you get permission to film that and you wanted to share it, absolutely you can send that into the foundation, because overall what they're looking for is success stories and what to build on. If things aren't working in the continuous model that they have right now, what can we do to change it up so that we be better? And like yourself, looking to see those examples, you know, we do that for our students all the time. If we want them to write an essay, we want them to turn something in, we give them a rubric, we give them examples to show exemplars. And so we definitely would be looking for anybody that does end up recording any of their examples to send those in. And the CRF definitely will be looking for any ways that they can improve upon. And then, like you said, release those videos for others to see exemplars for how you should be doing it in your classroom, or at least an example of what you can do, and then tweak it to your advantage in your classroom. So I think that's definitely something that they're looking for.
Well, Val did add she would check with CRF for videos.
And they might have some already that they haven't, that we haven't put together yet. All right, moving forward. Now, these face-to-face dates aren't going to be your face-to-face dates. It's going to depend on your particular cohort that you're in. But what you want to look out for is finishing up anything that is on Canvas that needs to be finished. So if you're finished with your civil conversation model and you need to do your reflection, make sure you get to Canvas and finish those reflections. Chances are some of your cohorts may have already started with the second cycle. So if you're already started on that, good luck. And the role plays and simulations are very, very fun, definitely engaging for your students. At this point, I feel that we've pretty much wrapped everything up. So if you have any questions, let us know. Otherwise, you guys are doing fantastic out there. We love the feedback. We like to hear how it's changing your classrooms, and your students are definitely getting positive reactions from it. So that's always good. So we thank you for coming out this evening, and we thank you for participating. Those suggestions and the questions were great. And we'll be here for a few minutes if you have any questions for us right now.